From the crunchy Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA, it is time for another pomological episode of chemical-free horticultural hijinks you bet your garden. Interested in growing your own heirloom apples? I'm Mike McGrath, and we got a double header for you on today's show, true believers. Master fruit grower Lee Reich will lead us through the world of classic varieties, and then the orchard manager for the Seed Savers Exchange will tell us about an upcoming workshop where you learn about grafting apples and keep the trees. Plus, how to keep your lettuce from bolting in the spring. So stay right with us, cats and kittens, because it's all coming up right after this.
Support for You Bet Your Garden is provided by the Espoma Company, offering a complete selection of natural organic plant foods and potting soils. More information about Espoma and the Espoma Natural Gardening Community can be found at espoma.com.
Welcome back to another thrilling episode of You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath. Before we get started, in the Taking Care of Business department, I am happy to announce that I will appear at the Allentown Public Library on Tuesday, March 21st at 2 in the afternoon, and it's free. Be there or be square, cats and kittens. All right, now that we got the event out of the way, here's what's going to happen today. We are doing our first one-topic show, and it's about heirloom apples. You're going to hear Lee Reich describe some fabulous old heirloom apples, and then we're going to tell you about a remarkable workshop where you can graft your own heirloom apples. So on TV, there won't be any phone calls. We are taping phone calls, and we'll be back to our regular format next week. On the podcast and radio show, there will be phone calls. So if you want to hear the whole schmagegi, you should listen to the podcast and or your local radio station. But if you want to see what we're talking about, you should also watch the TV show, which is easily accessible at our website, youbetyourgarden.org. Have I confused you enough? I hope so. Let's get started.
Apple scrubs, how I love you, how I love you.
It is time to welcome a man who has been our most frequent guest by far, my friend Lee Reich, author of more gardening books than we could name in this entire segment. And we tend to have him on every time he comes out with a new book. It's a bookette. What would you say? It is, what do they call these things?
Tiny folio.
Tiny folios. A cornucopia in the palm of your hand. This little book features 250 delectable watercolors, most painted by women artists from the visual catalog of fruit varieties commissioned by the U.S. Department of Ag between 1886 and 1942. So this is the kind of stuff they would sell at a botanical garden gift shop or in museums and stuff, right, Lee?
Yeah, it's not even just in a regular bookstore. I think that, you go to a bookstore and you getting ready to check out, and all of a sudden you see this little book there,
right,
with some very pretty pictures in it and some history and some, botany.
I focused on the apples in this book. They take up a good portion of the book, and I believe you have a special fondness for apples. So what I'd like to do is concentrate. I've asked you in advance to pick a couple of varieties that might be of interest to the homeowner that are still available, and or name some varieties that are no longer available um, but would have been interesting in the home garden. The Baldwin apple?
Yeah, that's interesting historically, although, for a home garden, uh, it takes some effort, depending on where you are in the country, to grow apples. So I would grow apples, the varieties specifically for the best possible flavor, if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
put that effort. You can go to the supermarket or a local orchard and get all sorts of apples. But if you want like a really different, unique, and delectable apple, grow that yourself. And so back to Baldwin. So Baldwin was not the best apple in flavor. I mean, I have tasted it, but it was very widely grown in this country up to 1934. There was a very, very cold winter. It was historical. There's whole like articles written just on the winter of 1934, and it wiped out, especially in the Northeast. That was the most widely planted apple, and it wiped them out. And when people replanted, they didn't want to risk losing it again.
You're killing me here, Lee. You got to pronounce this one.
Bascoop. So that's a Dutch apple, and it's an heirloom variety. And I have to say that I have not tasted that one. I planted it back in the mid '80s, and I think because it was on a rootstock that was too vigorous, and I was trying to keep it. I had apples planted very close, so I had to keep pruning it to keep it small, which encouraged vegetative growth. So I never got fruit from it. But I have on very good authority that's a very good apple.
So this variety is available today, but
Yeah,
it's specialty sources.
definitely. Most of these would be specialty sources.
Calville Blanc?
Calvo Blanc, yes, I have had that one. That is a very not only delicious but beautiful apple. It almost looks like porcelain. It was the favorite apple of Louis XIV, and it's definitely worth growing. And I grew it many years ago. I don't grow it now, but I limited the number of apples I grow a few years ago.
We move on to Cox Orange Pippin apple.
Very delicious apple. That is the number one apple in England, and it has been for a number of years. I did try and grow it. One problem with growing some of these British varieties and the Dutch variety, Belle de Bascoop, that I mentioned,
Right.
their climate is, or used to be, it's not that different now, but they have typically, historically, very moderate summers where it never gets too hot, and winters never get too cold, and during ripening season, you don't get a lot of heat. So it influences the flavor of the apple. So Cox's Orange Pippin is a great apple, but I'm not 100% sure grown here that it would give its best flavor.
Oh, my Lord. I'm not Spitzenberg.
Oh, this is his full name is Aesopus Spitzenberg. Okay, so if I was going to grow one apple just for flavor,
Right.
this is the one.
Really?
It has a long history. First of all, it was Thomas Jefferson's favorite apple.
That's a good recommendation.
Right. And yeah, he was no slacker when it came to gardening. And the other thing is that I live right near the town of Aesopus, where it originated.
Oh, the next one. What a delightful name. The Swear apple.
Swar. Oh yeah, that was a misprint.
Oh, okay.
The people that did these illustrations, they were artists, not pomologists.
Right.
So when people sent things in, they might have misread the handwriting, or even people that sent it in might have not known it was. But swar is a Dutch word for heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And where I am was settled originally by the Dutch, and that's another apple that originated in this area. And once again, not a beautiful apple by today's standards, but very, very good tasting apple.
Right, because I see it's covered with specks,
Right.
and people are looking for perfect and would never consider that this is the way it's supposed to look.
Right.
Macoun?
Oh, that one is very available today. Sometimes it's called McCown, and it was one of the offspring of Macintosh.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that old. It's only 100 years old as opposed to 300 years old. But that is also one of my favorite apples. Interestingly, I do grow that one
Mm-hmm.
because just for the flavor. And I grow it, and an orchard nearby grows it also.
Right.
to say the fruit tastes totally different from the two places.
Newtown Pippin. What is
Oh,
Pippin?
Pippin just means apple.
Oh, okay. I thought that was malice.
Well, Pippin is a colloquial term for apple.
Okay.
The variety originated in Newtown, New York,
Mm-hmm.
which actually the name later was changed to Elmhurst, which if you're a New Yorker, you
Right.
know that
I know
that's Queens.
Elmhurst. Yeah.
Yeah, that's Queens, New York. And that's also a very old apple because obviously it has the old name of Elmhurst, and it originated hundreds of years ago. It was very, very popular apple, such a popular apple that was the major apple shipped to Britain from the U.S.
Huh.
And when Benjamin Franklin was in England,
Yeah.
serving as a diplomat or something, he had boxes of them shipped to him there so he could enjoy them there. And then, a century later, Queen Victoria was so enamored with this apple that there was a special tariff on American apples to come into Britain. She did not have that tariff on Newtown Pippin apple.
Ha ha! That's great.
And I have grown that apple and I've tasted that apple. And that's another apple that is not at its best when you pick it. You have to let it sit in cold storage till about February, and then it's really, really good.
Well, this is a good time for me to mention that the book is not just about apples. You cover a lot of other fruits, but as I was reading it, I'm thinking Lee loves the part about apples. And I think the book could have been nothing but apples and still be cool. And then they might hire you to write a book about all the other fruits. But anyway, the name of the book is Fruit by Lee Reich, R-E-I-C-H. It's from Abbeville Press, and it is a great thing to just pick up and flip through. So thank you once again for joining us and elucidating us this time about apples.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being had, Lee. You're always welcome.
Geez, I always think that when I say that.
All right, take care, man. We'll see you again.
Bye.
Well, it's time for me to take a little break and happily announce that I will take to the road once again to appear at the Allentown Public Library on Tuesday, March 21st at 2 p.m. It is a free event, and that's 2 in the afternoon, cats and kittens, not a 2 a.m. show. You can enjoy lunch in the wonderfully resurrected downtown of Allentown. Come see me at 2 o'clock, and then you can do whatever you want. And remember, the event is free. I'm reasonably inexpensive, Mike McGrath, and you're listening to You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA.
Support for You Bet Your Garden is provided by the Espoma Company, offering a complete selection of natural organic plant foods and potting soils. More information about Espoma and the Espoma Natural Gardening Community can be found at espoma.com.
Apple scrubs, how I love you, how I love you.
Welcome back to another thrilling episode of You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath. And now, let's take a close look at apples. We just heard and or saw Lee Reich, our favorite fruit expert, talking about heirloom apples and their beauty or lack of beauty, but their fabulous tastes. Maybe you wishes to grow some of your own. Well, guess what? The Seed Savers Exchange has a remarkable workshop coming up. One of the first I've seen that combines both the visual over Zoom or something similar with hands-on experience. It sounds wonderful to me. And here to discuss it with me and all of yous is Jaime Hansen, the orchard, what?
I'm the orchard manager at Seed Savers Exchange.
Okay, see, that's why I get the big money. I don't know anything anymore. Jaime, thanks so much for being with us. The series of workshops really jumped out at me. Now, before we get into the details, I want to alert everybody that the deadline for registering is March 23rd, correct?
That's correct, yes.
So if you want to do this, cats and kittens, jump on it, because you snooze, you lose. So your workshop comes in a variety of packages. Tell us about the basic one where you simply learn via video.
Yeah, so we have a grafting class on April 14th and 15th. There are 7 sessions, so you sign up for a time slot that best meets your schedule. And for $35, you get to attend the Zoom call with myself and our orchard advisor, Lindy Lee. And part of that package is going to be you're expected to have your own scionwood, your own rootstock, your own knife, and we're going to walk you through the process. So we start with an overview of why do we graft, how do we graft, a few tips on tree care, and then we break out into separate rooms with small groups, and every group will have a knife coach. So that'll be someone like me or one of my coworkers, and we'll walk you through the steps. You make your cuts whenever we make our cuts, and by the end of the class, you'll have 1 tree successfully grafted, and you'll be ready to do the other 4 on your own.
But as they say on the TV commercials, that's not all. The materials you talked about, the tools, the scion, which is the part of the plant that you're going to put onto a rootstock to actually grow that variety of apple tree, you can increase your participation, and Seed Savers will send you, I believe it begins with 10 scions.
Yeah, so if you want to go that step further and you don't have the material yourself, for $75, we send you 5 M7 rootstock, 5 historic varieties from our collection, and the grafting tape, the labels, essentially everything that you need other than a knife.
That's great. And you mentioned that this is part of this workshop, and part of you providing physical materials is to protect these rare varieties, right? The only way to do that is to grow them out.
Yeah, exactly. So in our collection, we have about 1,000 unique historic varieties. And the only way to protect them over the long term is to not only have them in collections, but also have them in the hands of at-home gardeners, of other orchardists. And so this workshop is really our way of ensuring that our work isn't standing on its own in our collection, and that we are getting these materials back into the hands of your average gardeners, farmers, and anybody who's interested in historic fruit trees.
And now let's talk about the bonus round, where you're sending them everything but your own hands to do this with, because there's yet another level, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So for $115, you get the 5 scion, the 5 rootstock, a thumb cot, your grafting tape, and then you're also going to get a knife. And we offer both right and left-handed. It's important to have that bevel on the right side. So we really tailor this so that it can meet anybody's needs and also their time. And for every level, the $35, the $75, and the $115, what's unique about our grafting class is that we also offer 3 follow-up sessions where we walk you through the first year of caring for your tree and what all you need to do to protect it from rodents, from the weather, and from maybe your kid in the backyard.
Well, the kid in the backyard is going to wait until it gets big and then climb it. And that doesn't hurt anybody. Sometimes they can get the good apples up top. Is there going to be any attempt to stay in touch with these people? And in addition, how many years until they get fruit do you expect?
Yeah, so we don't have any programs where we reach out to people who have taken the grafting class in the past, but you can always opt to be on our email delivery service. We'll be reaching out about all of the different things happening here at Seed Savers. In terms of how long it'll take you to get fruit on your trees, it really depends on what variety. Some can produce as early as 3 years old, and some will take closer to 10 years. So it really just depends on what you receive in those 5 scionwood that we're going to send you.
And again, specialized tools that you'll supply. Go through those again, because I'm fascinated by this.
So the first tool you're going to need is a grafting knife. That's a single beveled edge, and we have right and left. You're also going to need the thumb caught. This protects your thumb whenever you're making those cuts. And grafting tape. This is a really flexible tape that holds your graft in place while it's healing. And then if you have them, this isn't something that we send, but it makes it a lot easier, is a pair of clippers. And of course a tag, which I don't have an example of here today.
How do people sign up?
Yeah, so you can visit our website, seedsavers.org, and you can look up grafting class and it'll come right up. And then you just pick your time slot. There's 7 options, and then we'll send you out your supplies in early April.
This is just remarkable. I think it's a fabulous idea. And thank you for coming on the show to help us understand what's involved. Jaime Hansen, the orchard manager at Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. Thank you so much for being on You Bet Your Garden.
Thanks for having me.
Now watch you sitting there, seeing the passers-by all stare, like you have no place to go. But there's so much they don't know about apple scrub. You've been stood around for years, see my smiles and touch my tears. How it's been a long, long time, and how you've been on my mind, my apple scrubs. Apple scrubs, apple scrubs. How I love you, how I love you. In the fog and in the rain, through the pleasures and the pain, on the step outside you stand, with your flowers in your hand, my apple scrubs. While the years come and go, now your love must surely show me that without all time and space, we're together face to face, my apple scrubs. Apple scrubs, apple scrubs. How I love you, how I love you.
Michael, welcome to You Bet Your Garden.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I am just ducky. Thank you, Michael. How are you doing?
I'm pretty good.
Okay, and where is Michael pretty good?
St. Louis, Missouri.
Oh, very good.
I actually had a question about peony flowers. So my wife really likes those flowers, but I don't know, I know there's a couple different types of peonies, and where I'm thinking about planting it's a very kind of shaded part of our house. So I was wondering what advice you would have, where to start.
Okay, is it shaded by the house or by trees?
Kind of both. It's on the north side, and then there is a crabapple tree growing in that, flower bed area.
And how does the crabapple tree flower in the springtime?
Yeah, flowers really nicely in the springtime.
Well, then I think it's worth a shot. I can only think of two types of peonies. Even though I grow them, I'm far from an expert in them. You got the ones that you put in the ground, and they break through in the spring and bloom beautifully. And then you've got what's called the tree peony, where the peonies have been grafted onto a rootstock. I presume we're talking about peonies planted in the ground.
I like both. I know my wife likes some of the tree peonies, some of the woody ones. I don't know if all of them have to be. Do all of them have to be grafted?
Oh, yeah. I don't think that's a normal form, although I could be wrong.
Okay.
So, if you say the apple tree blossoms beautifully, that area would seem to be okay. A lot of people think about shade, and they're thinking about the summertime when the deciduous trees are in full bloom. But in the late winter, early spring, a lot of light gets through those bare branches. So again, the apple tree to me is a dead giveaway that it's all right. Now, in my experience, and again, I inherited a peony that has bloomed every year for 35 years, and I don't know how long it was in the ground before that. It is right at the edge of the road. I have to generally put up a little bit of fencing or string to keep it off of the actual tarmac. And it gets road salt. It gets all sorts of disrespect. And it blooms beautifully every year. So I consider them a very tough plant. Now, as you're going to want to, if you're going to buy it online, you're going to want to go to online sources, and you're going to look for shade tolerance. You might want to get in touch with the Missouri Extension Service and see if they have a list of peonies that tolerate shade. I would not be surprised about that. And if you're going to get them from a local nursery, as soon as they start opening up for the season, or if you know them, if they're a neighborhood garden center you frequent, give them a call and ask what they're going to have coming in. And then you can reverse look up those varieties and see if they're ones that you want.
Okay, that sounds like some good idea. I also know we have the botanical garden here, so maybe I'll give them a call as well. And
I appeared there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, years ago. Meaningless.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful garden. Yeah.
If you wanted to go there, well, you can go there just for the joy of it. But I would go online and see if they have a page or a click-through where you can ask them questions. And also look at the events and see if there's an upcoming event where the Q&A would be of great interest to you.
Okay, no, I will do that. And then so once I find out the variety, is there anything special about planting them? Do I need to acidify? Do they like basic soil, acidic soil, or is it just put them in the ground and go for it?
Well, the what I'll call the natural peonies get, buried in the ground a few inches deep, um, like spring bulbs, but
Mm.
they they really thrive. They send down deep roots. That, in my experience, they actually mitigate downward, so that after like a decade, you can't find that root ball anymore. They're very hardy.
Huh.
They don't need to be protected over winter. And if you're going to go for the tree form, you want to make sure that no mulch or other material is touching the trunk of the tree. You can see the root flare coming out of the bottom of the trunk. And if there is a graft on the tree, you want to be careful not to harm that, and that must be above the soil line.
Okay. All right. Well, that all sounds good.
Yeah. And after you get them in, give some compost around the base of the tree, the hardy perennial, wait till it's all done, then spread some compost around, because that's the time where it'll be developing the following year's flowers.
All right. That's a lot of help.
Well, it's time for me to take a little break and announce that we are addressing one of the major concerns we've been hearing about this winter. Why does my lettuce bolt so early in the spring? It turns bitter. I can't stand it. Well, in this week's question of the week, we're going to address all the ways you can lengthen your lettuce harvest in the spring. That's coming up soon on You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA.
This is 91.3 FM WLVR Bethlehem, a broadcast service of Lehigh University, streaming online at WLVR.org from the Univest Public Media Center.
Welcome back to another thrilling episode of You Bet Your Garden from the Univest Studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. I am your host, Mike McGrath, and we're in the stretch now, cats and kittens. In this week's question of the week, we're going to address all the ways you can lengthen your lettuce harvest in the spring, right after another phone call at 888-492-9444. 888-492-9444. Dan, welcome to You Bet Your Garden.
Hey, Mike. Good to be on.
It's good to have you on, Dan. How you doing?
I'm doing great today.
And where is Dan doing great?
I'm in Cheverly, Maryland, right outside of D.C. in Prince George County.
The greater D.C. area. I miss it. I used to spend a lot of time there. Okay, so what's up, man? What can we do you for?
I've got a nice little yard, and I've been doing a lot of gardening, but I'm always looking for more cheap ways to get compost and to be more efficient. And so I'm hoping to put a compost pile in my yard like my dad had growing up. I've got one location that works well for it, or at least it's out of the way of pretty things. And my question is whether bamboo and Japanese knotweed, which grow in my neighbor's yard next to it, are going to invade that compost pile, and then am I going to accidentally transplant, pests all over the yard?
Well, you'll probably do that anyway. How close is the Japanese knotweed to your property?
It is. It has made occasional forays under, so I imagine that the rhizome is there already. I've seen like one or two sprouts come out, but I could touch it. It comes over, it leans over my fence, and then occasionally one or two will come up, and as soon as I see it, I try to pull it out immediately. But that's as much as I've done. Because
if that gets established, you're done. You won't have a garden.
Well, luckily this is it's a good. I don't know if this makes a difference, but it's a good 40 feet from where I have the rest of my garden. It's this one little corner, and then there's grass and a terrace, and then on the upper side of the terrace is where I have the actual garden, which is a good distance away.
You say it's up on a terrace, so the knotweed?
No, so the knotweed is down below,
right?
And then up above there's an area that has like my patio and some garden beds.
Okay, so it would have to
so it's
climb.
Pretty far away. It would have to go, pretty far, like the length of my house.
Well, it will eventually. You can be sure of that. Now, let's talk about the bamboo. On my property, let's take the house in the middle, and then heading north, of course, is my garden, because just to the south is a stream, and then there's a clump of bamboo that was planted perhaps 75, 80 years ago. So it predates me and my neighbors, making us innocent. I do most of my composting in the back of the garden, but one year when I was overloaded with leaves, I set up a black plastic composter over there and was astonished at the end of the season. It had been filled with leaves and coffee grounds and stuff. At the end of the season, a bamboo culm had come up and knocked the lid off. So, I mean, it was, I am Godzilla, you are a foolish, puny little man.
Right.
But it didn't harm the compost. When I took the composter off, there's no bottom on those things. You don't want a bottom on them. And then I was just able to harvest the compost around the bamboo. So, that's the situation. Whatever you do, you want your compost pile, no matter what you're going to encompass it with, surround it with, whether it's wire fencing, some sort of a wooden compost bin. You want to make sure that it's protected, first of all, from the knotweed. You want to make sure it has ground contact so earthworms can come and go and help you out. And if knotweed gets in there, you're doomed. I mean, you're just, you got to sell the house in the wintertime and try again someplace else. But the bamboo, you can work around. However, the bamboo is going to continue to advance into your property. And that's a bigger danger, because that will affect your foundation. It'll eat your terrace for lunch. So I think even though you mentioned that you are, quote, cheap, I think you should invest in a landscaper coming out and installing a rhizome barrier on the property line, just to prevent both those things from coming over. It will
Will that prevent the knotweed as well? I mean, is it effective against the knotweed as well?
It should be. They're both rhizomaceous plants. And again, a landscaper is going to know the correct depth, and they're also going to know how to correctly install the material. That's very important. You can't leave any gaps. You can't do slipshod work, but it will keep the bamboo on your neighbor's property, and it should keep out the Japanese knotweed as well. Because like I said, both of them are just going to continue to advance to your house until 5 years from now you go, oh, I should have done something 5 years ago.
Yeah. I'm told that it used to be the back of our house a few owners ago. It was bamboo all the way across the backyard. And then they spent a lot of money. They excavated the whole thing. And instead of it being a slope, they split it into like a 2-level thing like I described.
Right.
So it used to be bamboo across it. So now the bamboo is just on the other side of the fence. So I don't know whose fault it was, but it shouldn't have gotten there in the first place.
Well, if you know where your property line is, if it's on your side, it's your responsibility. If it's on your neighbor's side, it's their responsibility to get rid of it. But I think in this case, being proactive with the rhizome barrier, especially at this time of the season before the bamboo starts to run again, I think it'd be a wise investment.
All right. Well, thanks so much.
All right. You take care, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Bye-bye. As promised, it is time to get to the question of the week: how to get your lettuce to persist into summer. Eric in State College, PA writes, a couple years ago, I noticed that my lettuce was bolting and becoming really bitter early in the summer. And replanting lettuce in the warm summer soil was not productive. So I started using shade cloth over my lettuces and similar cool season crops. I purchased 40% sunblock shade cloth and clipped the fabric to the rabbit/groundhog fence, which is about 2 feet above the raised bed. Note: be careful not to let any fabric dangle onto the ground because groundhogs can climb the fabric. This has extended my lettuce season, except for the groundhog issue. Perhaps this year I will extend the shade cloth to cover the tomatoes if things get too hot. My response: Eric, if summer gets too hot for tomatoes in central PA, I'm moving to the tropics of New England. Anyway, you point out the challenge in trying to enjoy your first ripe tomatoes in a summer salad. By that point in the season, heat-sensitive lettuce will send up a tall central stalk and the leaves will become bitter, as evidenced by a white latex-like liquid on the cut leaves. Shade cloth is an excellent way to slow this process. Available at hipper local independent garden centers, shade cloth comes in a variety of percentages, indicating the amount of direct sun it blocks. It is typically suspended on hoops to hold it above the plants. The taller the hoops, the better, as a too close to the plants setup might trap excess heat and defeat the purpose. Professional shade cloth is draped over very tall hoops and left open at the ends to protect against trapped heat. Used correctly, shade cloth will lower the temperature at the soil level, especially with adequate watering, which is important. Now, if the water is applied with sprinklers, it should only be done in the early morning. If you're using drip irrigation, do it when the sun goes down to chill the soil. Remember that lettuce plants thrive in cool soil, but lettuce seeds do not. You want to start your first run or two indoors and transplant them into the soil as soon as it's, quote, workable, which means not frozen. If you're in an area where frozen soil quickly morphs into hot days, install the plants at night. If you're in a really cold clime, remove all mulch from the planting bed 2 weeks in advance to allow the sun to directly warm the soil. Use row covers to protect the plants from extreme cold early on, then switch to shade cloth when the heat gets hot. An easy alternative is to situate the plants where nearby trees will provide shade as they leaf out, but they will allow full sun to hit the plants before that. Note: lettuce sown in the, quote, fall, which really means late August in most regions, will always grow better and easier than spring lettuce. In late summer, early fall, the soil is warm and ideal for direct seeding. Then the shorter days and cooler nights will prevent bolting naturally. Do you really care if you enjoy most of your tomato and lettuce sandwiches and/or salads in early September? It's a heck of a lot easier to achieve. No matter what, pick the tomatoes and greens early in the morning for the sweetest flavors. Variety choice is crucial. In the spring, you should only plant varieties touted as heat-resistant, heat-tolerant, or, quote, slow to bolt. Back in 1994, garden writer Lois Trigg Chaplin compiled a list of heat-resistant varieties for the July-August issue of Organic Gardening magazine. Her first choice was pretty obvious, Slow Bolt, which was spelled and is spelled Slobolt. And it was indeed the slowest variety to bolt in her Alabama garden, while the popular variety Green Ice lasted the longest at a nearby neighbor's place. Both are leaf lettuces. A Florida gardener found Sierra, a loose head lettuce, to be the best at beating his extreme heat. But it was also the winner in Londonderry, Vermont, a polar opposite in climate. Oregon State University researchers developed a head-forming variety called Summertime, which should grow in summer, right? In Dallas, Mission, another head lettuce, won the war. The romaine variety Plato excelled in both California and Clemson University test gardens. Dr. David Bradshaw of Clemson asserts that romaine lettuces in general always outlast other types in the spring. The classic Amish variety Deer Tongue, which I grow every year, also gets a shout out in the article. And finally, two vibrant red lettuces make the list. Red Sails, another variety that graces my garden every year, and Rosalita, which has to be Bruce Springsteen's favorite lettuce. They both resist heat well. Now, when the weather gets warm, make sure you have 2 inches of mulch around the plants to keep the soil cool. Excellent choices would be compost, shredded fall leaves, or pine straw. Terrible choices would be any kind of dyed, bagged wood chips, although arborist wood chips can do in a pinch. Just keep the layer fairly thin. We finish up with groundhogs. They are a daunting pest. They can easily burrow under your beds, and they are excellent climbers. Any fencing must go down deep and have an unsupported baffle at the top to drop them back down onto their furry little butts. My first line of defense would be a motion-activated sprinkler. When it detects something moving near your beds, it throws a couple of cups of cold water at them. Sorry, Gus. Hope we didn't ruin any of your scratch-off tickets. Well, that sure was some interesting information about begging your lettuce not to bolt, now wasn't it? Luckily for you, the question of the week appears in print at the Gardens Alive website. To read it over at your leisure or your leisure, just click the link for the question of the week at our website, which is still and will forever be youbetyourgarden.org. Gardens Alive supports the You Bet Your Garden question of the week, and you'll always find the latest question of the week at the Gardens Alive website. Yikes, my producer is threatening to eat my apples if I don't get out of this studio. We must be out of time. But you can call us anytime at 888-492-9444 or send us your email. You're tired, you're poor, you're wretched refuse of a question teeming towards our garden shore at YBYG@WLVT.org. Please include your location. I'm talking to you. Hey, I'm talking to you. Location. That was subliminal, kids. You Bet Your Garden is a half-hour public television show, an hour-long public radio show and podcast, all produced and delivered to you weekly from the Univest studios at Lehigh Valley Public Media in Bethlehem, PA. Our radio show is distributed by PRX, the Public Radio Exchange. Remember your location. You Bet Your Garden was created by Mike McGrath. Mike McGrath was created on a dark and stormy night. Ken Queter is our musical director. Our chief content officer is Yoni Greenbaum. Our angel of the airways is Christine Dempsey. Our sound engineer and set decorator is cheerful Charlie Sarah. Our social media director is Amanda Norfleet. check out her fine work at the You Bet Your Garden Facebook page, which has been filled with your pretty pictures lately. Teresa Radke is our peerless princess of profound production. Our audio editor is the always lovely Jonas Bowen. Judicious Jake Boyer does the video. Our directorial director of direction is the harassed and harried Javier Diaz. Also starring Jacob Morris, Act Attack, and our beloved band of card sharks, roustabouts, and fortune tellers. Our CEO, Tim Fallon, stares into the rain and asks, "Is that all there is?" I'm your host, Mike McGrath, and I have peppers growing, lettuce sprouting, tomatoes waiting for their turn, peas propagating, and more than I care to think about. Until I see you again next week.